Good morning. How are we all? It's going quite interesting. This quite enjoyable. Waking up on a Monday morning, having watched United actually play good football and win a game. It's something I could definitely get used to, and I think it's really something positive to sort of build on going forward. I think Ipswich was always going to be a bit of a funny game just because it was his first game with no training. I think Bodo, was a bit of a challenge, but not too much of one. But I think it was an easy win in some respects for the team and for him. But I think yesterday, against a combative Everton side, shall we say, I think it was always going to be treated more as like the first proper test. Certainly how I felt it was anyway. I know Everton are shit. Everton have always been shit for as long as you can remember. But you can't say that they don't try, they don't put some effort in, and they don't sort of kick people around a little bit. And I think that's probably what we needed to build on the previous two performances. I think to come out of it the way we did, I think it was better than I anticipated. I was expecting us to win. I wasn't expecting us to stick four past them and keep a clean sheet. And yeah, I think it's just it was. I think it's as good as we could have hoped for with the new manager. Sort of, actually a week into playing games. I mean, he's had 3 games in the space of a week on the back of 2 training sessions. I don't think you could have really come out of it expecting much more than we did. A win in the Europa, a win and a draw in the league against sort of 2 very different sides, I think was actually pretty good. Obviously, it steps up a bit from here, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, and let's just sort of enjoy it for what it was. So, I mean, to start off with, I suppose the main surprise was the side he picked. For me, I felt given how well Højlund played on Thursday, I think most people were expecting him to start, and I know there was a hell of a lot of people very upset that Xerxes and Rashford started. I get that to an extent, but more because I was disappointed that Højlund didn't start, having scored 2. But taking it as taking a wider view and understanding that he's trying to give people sort of minutes while not sort of overdoing it with them. He's trying to sort of get them through training, because the ones that played on Thursday couldn't train on Friday, so that meant he only got to train Saturday, that sort of stuff. So I think it's quite an interesting juggling act he's having to perform at the moment, to try and manage people's minutes, but not overburden some people more than others. So I got it to an extent. A little unhappy with certain aspects of it, but I think, as I mentioned last week, I think certain players are starting to pick themselves to a large extent. I think he's now sort of trying to fine-tune and get everybody else up to speed, so there's not such a marked drop in quality or fitness when he does make changes, and he likes to make his changes. So I think on the predictions app, which I do every week, I should start posting them on my YouTube channel just so people can have a look at them. But I think I've got 5 out of 11. I think formation I got right, but yeah, I think I got 5 out of 11 out of the starting 11 out. But I think Ahmad picks himself, Mazraoui picks himself, Onana, De Ligt. I was expecting Shaw to start, not Martinez. But I think it's much of a muchness at the moment with either of them. I think they're both probably at similar levels of fitness. You would think Martinez is slightly far forward than Shaw is, just because Shaw been out for half his life. But I think match fitness wise, I think they're probably much of a muchness. So you can sort of chop and change those two without a noticeable drop in quality or fitness. So I think that I didn't have a problem with. Midfield, I was expecting Ugarte to start, having given played well on Wednesday, but again, Thursday. Sorry, but again, you've got to bear in mind that we have got Arsenal coming up this weekend, in midweek. So I think again he's having to manage his time. Casemiro and Mainu starting straight away without getting any minutes under his belt here and there was a bit of a surprise to me, and I think it's shown not necessarily lack of fitness, just a bit of ring rustiness, really. I think he was maybe not as sharp as he will be when he's played a couple of games. Understandably so. I mean, he's been out for, 2 months? So I think it's always going to take a bit of time for people to just get up to the speed of the game. Factor in the fact that we're also playing a different formation. He's probably being asked to do things that he wasn't necessarily being asked to do before. I think it was always going to catch people out a little bit, especially those that haven't played any time. And I think we started okay. That first sort of 10 minutes, we were okay. We weren't pulling up any trees, but we were okay. But I think the drop off after that, for the next sort of 20 minutes or so, more or less until we scored, I think that was what you get when you change a lot of players and you change a formation in a really short space of time. It wasn't that they weren't doing things properly. It was just the misplaced passes, the slight sort of being in slightly the wrong place, being too far ahead of the ball, too far behind it, that sort of stuff. And it just looked a bit disjointed, because it is. That sort of familiarity with the position and the personnel, it's going to take time. I think they was never going to get that in the space of a week, even though we played 3 games in that week. And for me, I wasn't overly concerned, because you think that's going to come. It's not about a lack of ability with that sort of stuff. It's just the lack of familiarity with the position they're being asked to play, the formation they're playing in, and what they're being asked to do. No real sort of concerns over that too much. But I think it did give Everton a bit of a footing in the game that they probably got it easier than they would necessarily have got it previously, or sort of give it 3 months. They won't get that sort of freedom to do what they did for that 20-minute period in a couple of months, when we're a lot more familiar with who's playing where and what. Everton are Everton. They're quite limited in what they've got, but they make use of the players that they have to the maximum. Really, they haven't got a forward really to rely on. So they're chopping and changing people like Calvert-Lewin, who's never been a prolific goal scorer and is never really going to be. And is it Beto? I think was the forward that started yesterday. He looked, positionally he looked okay, big physical sort of lad, but you didn't really get the impression that he was he was sort of a bit of a goal hanger, and one chance was all it's going to take for him. Yeah, I think they capitalised on a system that United aren't familiar with, and capitalise on the fact that players who are playing in that system aren't very familiar with it, bar a couple of them. So I think it possibly made them look better than they were, and probably made us look worse. But I think for that first half an hour or so, it was much of a muchness. I think that we were okay for the first 10 minutes. Pretty poor, and couldn't seem to keep hold of the ball or get a footing in the game for that 20 minutes. And I think then it's you're back onto the qualities of Ahmad. I think it was his closing down that sort of and nicking the ball off their left back, I think it was. I think that you can't substitute that energy and that enthusiasm and that sort of will to run with technique. You've got to cover that ground. You've got to be enthusiastic enough and energetic enough to sort of do that. And given the fact that he did it twice in a game, that both times resulted in goals, massive credit to him. But I think that I think though his part in both those goals was essential, but I think his whole game was great. His energy, he's pretty much nailed that right wing back position down already at the moment, because he doesn't let anybody down. He's always willing. He takes up really good positions. He puts in the work, and you can't knock him for it. The first goal with Rashford, yes, it took a big deflection off Brampway, but it was going in anyway. And it's actually nice to see us doing something not earth-shattering, but doing something like that at set piece was actually quite nice. It's not just swinging the ball in the box and sort of waiting for the keeper to come out and catch it, which is what always happens. It seems like despite us having big centre halves playing for us, it was just nice to see something slightly different. The shot was going in bottom corner, I think, by the look of it anyway. The fact that Braithwaite diverted it past the goalie didn't make too much of a difference. I think we were always it was going in anyway. As I say, the Xerxes goal, I think it was nice to see him score, and I think he actually had a pretty decent game. I think some of his, not so much his finishes, because I think they were pretty straightforward. Really, they're quite run of the mill. He didn't mess about first time finishes, but they were both very similar finishes when you look at them. But I think his whole game, I think he grew into the game, and it's something that we saw on his debut. Actually, I think for 10 minutes or so he looks a little bit fish out of water. Whether it just takes him that long to get his head round sort of the game, whether it just takes his body that long to get up to speed, I'm not too sure. But I think his passing range, I think his ability to find a bit of space, which was evident in his debut, I think, and hasn't been too much since, I think was really evident yesterday. I think he took up some really nice positions, just to buy himself that little bit of space, just to give him a bit of time to get moving. I think he had that pass out wide for Ahmad, I think it was, which led to the corner, which led to the goal, if memory serves. And his pass out for Ahmad, I think, for Rashford's second. That sort of stuff, I think, that's what we need. Because I think that level of passing ability and creativity and that vision, really, I think is something that we generally speaking rely on Bruno for. And when Bruno was either playing a little bit further back or a little bit further forward, to be honest, or isn't quite on his game as he wasn't early on in the season, I think it's really noticeable that if he isn't providing it, we don't seem to have anybody else that does. And I think it was actually quite refreshing and reassuring to see that we do have somebody that's more than capable of making these sort of passes, that has that wider appreciation of what's going on around him, and then the ability to make the most of that. I think his performance, more for me, for his passing range and his positional play, was just as impressive, if not more so, than his finishing, which I think you would like to think a professional footballer at that level would be able to finish without too much drama anyway. Similarly, Rashford, I think his finish was, his second finish was very Rashford from 2 years ago. Is that sort of being in that sort of position and not farting around too much over what to do with the ball. There wasn't too much time for deliberation with it. And I think that was to his advantage, because he just took the chance relatively quickly. And I think, generally speaking, I think his play was, he looked more in tune with what was being asked of him yesterday than he did in the Ipswich game. And I think I said last week, I think the only thing he really did against Ipswich was score. I don't think he did an awful lot else, and he was quite fortunate in my eyes to play as long as he did. Speaking of which, this manager done half like a substitution, and he isn't shy about doing it really quickly. I think the first substitution yesterday was around the 55-minute mark. Now, whether that's been agreed with the player prior, which I do think it probably has been, just because of him trying to get everybody fit at the same sort, or to the same sort of fitness level as quickly as he can. I'm assuming that was the case, but he makes full use of his substitutions, and that was one of the main criticisms of Ten Hag, that he didn't, or it didn't feel like he did. And when he did, you were just left wondering, what's he doing? Why has he took him off? Why has he brought him on? You don't get that so much with Amorim at the moment. The only surprise about his substitutions at the moment is how quickly he makes them, not who he brings on and who he takes off. And I think that's partly because he's still managing sort of fitness levels and game time. He's also trying to evaluate who's going to be able to fit into his formation and what he's going to get out of the players that he has. But I think if he sees something that isn't quite working, or something's occurring that he hasn't accounted for, he really isn't overly precious about sticking to his original plan. And that can only be a positive, because at that sort of level, you rarely come across sort of opposition teams that will just start with one formation, stick with one formation, and just play it out regardless. You need to be adaptable, and I think that was one of Ten Hag's failings, definitely. I don't think it's going to be a failing for this guy, because I think he sees what's happening relatively quickly, whether it's with his own players or the opposition, and he's more than willing to make some changes depending on how things are going. And I think it is such a pleasing thing, because more often than not, it feels like the fans can see what's going wrong, but the manager can't. And I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. I hope to God it's not. It's exactly what we needed. It's exactly what we need going forward. And I think this is what we should be looking to build on. Another thing I just wanted to mention was the pressing. I think the pressing game was exactly what he would have been looking. Not exactly. I think it's still a work in progress, very much so. But you could see there was a lot more joined up thinking around the press, certainly from the front three. I think they were sort of chopping and changing. You could see it on some of the replays where one, say Rashford for instance, would go and close down the centre half or the goalie, and the position for like Xerxes, Bruno and that would change in relation to where the forward was. And I think rather than sort of just say Rashford charging at a goalie and everybody else just standing around just waiting to see what happened, there does seem to be a little bit more understanding that if he goes there, then I need to do this, which again you would like to think he's only going to improve in the weeks and months ahead as they get more familiar with it. Because I think it's much like anything else, if you've not done something before, you need to learn how to do it, and it doesn't become a habit for quite a long time. There needs to be a lot of repetition, needs to be a lot of practice with these sort of new information and new techniques that they're trying to learn on the fly at the moment. But I think you could see signs of it working a lot better yesterday than certainly a week ago. And hopefully, as more and more players get game time, as more and more players get familiar with this sort of pattern, you would like to think that will sort of pick up. And it shouldn't take forever. It's not like these players only ever play one formation. They don't. A lot of these players are internationals, and they don't play the same formation for their international sides as they do for the club sides. So they should be used to adapting. They've all played under Christ. At United, they played under more managers and soft shit over the last 5 years. And so they should be familiar with adapting to a different formation, different style of play. Hopefully, with a communicator who can get his message across really well, which seems to be the way with Amorim, you would like to think they're going to get their head around that really quickly, and then applying it in sort of in training and actual games shouldn't take too long. A couple of weeks to get your head around why they're doing it, and then a few months to get used to doing it, so it becomes more natural rather than a conscious sort of thought of I need to do this, I need to do that. I think that it's a good start. Not the finished article by any stretch of imagination, but I think there's a lot to be quite pleased with from yesterday and over last week. I mentioned there about Amorim's willingness to make substitutions, and I think using the squad the way he is, I think is starting to reap a lot of benefits. Now, I could be cynical and say that a lot of these injured players who suddenly have made some remarkable recovery were swinging lead a little bit, while they didn't like Ten Hag's training formations or just the way Ten Hag was. There probably is some of that. Not maybe as much as people think, but I think that there probably is an element of that, whether it's because they want to try and make a good impression on the new manager, or they just think, right, well, he's out of the way so I can actually do what I'm here to do. I don't know. But I think it's quite pleasing when you look at the bench for yesterday's game at the start, it was actually arguably stronger than the 11 that started playing. And utilising what he has in a sensible way, not overdoing it, bringing people on to keep them sort of match fit, give them a bit of a run, give them a sort of 10-20 minute workout, knowing full well that they're probably going to be playing on Wednesday against Arsenal, was sensible. Yes, it could have come back to bite him on the arse. It could have ended up with people getting a knock or like Mainu getting suspended, Martinez getting suspended. But I think by utilising the squad, it's what you've got them for ultimately. So you're not having to overburden certain players by playing them 90 minutes a week, 90 minutes a game, every game. Can't keep doing that. And I think he seems to be starting off on a really good foot and a really sensible approach. Whether he's doing this so he can evaluate the squad as well, I'm sure he is. I hope he is. But I think seeing him sort of chop and change, making changes that, yes, it can be a little bit disappointing at some points, but easier to understand rather than just sort of randomly playing people because they seem to have done all right in training, like Anthony. When you look at Anthony, you look at Ahmad, you think, really? Was he that much better in training to deserve a place in the side when Ahmad plays like that most of the time when he gets picked? Just really confusing sort of stuff. So I think his use of the squad, bringing Maguire on for 20 minutes, this sort of stuff, it's sensible. And hopefully, as he keeps doing this, which I fully anticipate he's going to do for the next couple of months, I think you would like to think he will get to a point where he has his starting 7 or 8 pretty much nailed down, except for injuries and suspensions and that sort of stuff. But generally, he'll have his go-to sort of core of the squad, which he will then supplement or sort of chop and change due to fitness and what have you afterwards. But I think it's yesterday was a really pleasing snapshot of a good baseline for us to build on. I don't think Ipswich was, and I don't think Bodo was really, because just the circumstances around it. And Bodo, with the best one in the world, and the Norwegian champions, yes, they're used to winning, but they're not used to playing teams of our quality on a week-to-week basis. And this is what we sort of need to be looking at. I think Everton, as poor as they are still an established Premier League side, and they know how to win games by not playing particularly well. For us to stick 4 past them was far more convincing than I expected it to be. I think Amorim said it in his press conference. He said he thinks we probably deserved more against Bodo than we got, and Everton probably deserved more from yesterday than they got. And I think that's probably a fair comment. I think Bodo we could have scored sort of 4 or 5. If yesterday had ended 3-1, 2-1 even, I don't think you could have had too many complaints, because Everton did create a few chances, just not particularly clear-cut chances. So I think it's a good baseline. It's a good point to start off with, but I think we probably need to temper our enthusiasm. And I think that's not necessarily going to be too difficult, because we all know that there are a lot of bigger tests coming up. I think we've got Arsenal, Liverpool and City in the next couple of weeks. You probably couldn't get 3 bigger tests, and I think we've got Tottenham as well at some point. You couldn't probably get 3 or 4 bigger tests in sort of this country than those 4 at the moment. And I think that isn't necessarily going to be an indication of where we are, but it's probably more of an indication of where we need to be working up to. Amorim's not getting overexcited, which is good, because it'd be very easy for him to get caught up in the enthusiasm, and the sorts of the backslapping he's getting from most United fans at the moment, because we're just playing better than we have done for years and years. Lots and lots of fans are very excited about that, just because it resembles something approaching what United used to be. And for a lot of us who grew up or were in sort of 20s and 30s when United were sort of smashing everybody, what they're seeing now is a bit, they can see where that could lead to. I don't think Amorim is going to get too far ahead of himself. He seems very aware that what we've done is pretty much out, and the teams that we're playing over the next couple of weeks are a better indication of where we are and what we need to be doing to get better than where we are than the likes of Ipswich and Everton, which we should be smashing anyway. Even if we're remotely competent, we should be beating teams like that. Yeah, so I'm not getting too excited, but I think it's encouraging that we can actually put the telly on to watch United or go to game, not expecting to be either bored shitless, expecting us to get beat or scrape some scrappy sort of point or victory here and there through more luck than good judgment and the occasional isolated incident of quality play. We actually seem to be going into a game now with the expectation that we'll at least give people a game. We do, like I said, since Rude come in, we've really seemed to have loosened up about scoring. So I think hopefully we'll put in a decent performance against Arsenal on Wednesday. I'm not saying we're going to win. In fact, I wouldn't be too surprised if we got beat. But Arsenal aren't great at the moment. And I think if we go in with a relatively strong side, which I am expecting, a clearer idea of how he wants us to play going forward, I think if we can defend properly, I think we're more than capable of scoring, definitely. Whether that's going to be good enough for a point or a victory, I'm not too sure. I'd probably take a point if we could, but I'm not expecting us to get spanked. And if you'd have asked me this question 6 weeks ago, I really would have. We'll just have to wait and see. He's got his sort of feet on the ground. There's nothing wrong with being a bit giddy about us playing better, because it's just nice. It's just pleasant, rather than being stressed about watching United. It's actually I'm going into games quite optimistic and hopeful. And that's what I hope we build on going forward. Anyway, I'll leave it there. That's just my thoughts on yesterday. I will probably do the same on Thursday morning. Thursday will be easier because I'm not at work at the moment. I am at work. My employees are really lucky to have me while I'm doing this, while getting paid for it. So yeah, I will see you Thursday. Hopefully it won't have been too traumatic to watch on the Wednesday night, and we'll just have a bit of a chat about it then. Any messages, comments, like, subscribe, usual sort of stuff, just leave it.